So I intended this video to come out on next Tuesday, but I ended up halfway through recording the Nova Open recap video, decided to swap that with this one. So you're going to hear me talk about in the beginning of Tuesday's video about why I'm using the microphone and stuff here. And that was because that was supposed to be today's video, but that's going to be then. So meh. Hey there, everyone. I'm Chris Renshaw, and if you're new to this channel, I talk about board games, card games, and RPGs, and other good tabletop games and stuff that I like to play and just how they impact my life. Specifically today, we're going to talk about RPGs. In fact, we're primarily going to be talking about the did I really just say Lord of the Rings? Yes, this is Lord of the Rings. Actually, it's almost that. You could Legend of the Five Rings. This is the newer RPG that's kind of like basically Game of Thrones but with samurai, that's put out by FFG. It's a very Japanese inspired game. But before we get into that, because this conversation is going to lead naturally into that, I like to put on a front, and I give off the impression between when you've seen me GM for the Dirtbags podcast, or heard me GM, I guess would be the better term, or just when I talk about RPGs, I am very confident in myself. And that's a lot of an act almost, I feel like sometimes, because there's always that piece of me that just feels like I'm just terrible at running games. Like I feel like I've put on this persona where people think, because I did a whole series of videos talking about RPGs, that I'm an expert, and specifically in like running games, then they think that like I'm greatest, but deep down, I still make a lot of mistakes. I mean, one of my first long-running campaigns had like this really big, dragon-y bad guy, and I was trying to come up for a cool name for him, so I came up with Draenus. And I thought it sounded cool and whatever, and it wasn't until my players heard it spelled out that they realized if you broke it up, it was Dr. Anus. And that's going to haunt me for like ever. You've heard it referenced on the Dirtbags of Holding podcast if you've not listened to that. So anyways, prior to Gen Con, I knew I was going to be running L5R at Gen Con, and my group doesn't play it a whole lot. So I needed to run some games and get re-familiar with the system so that I wasn't flubbing it up in front of people who paid to play L5R. Specifically, because I've recently got the Shadowlands book and been reading and reviewing that, it also came with this adventure that looked really cool. It's called Mask of the Oni. And it's all about like venturing into the Shadowlands to trying to do a quest. And so I was reading through this and prepping to run this game for some of the few people that were interested in L5R. And specifically, we had like 4th of July coming up. I wasn't really having a whole lot planned. Like, hey, let's run an L5R game. So like building up to that, I'm reading through this, and it mentions a lot that this is actually a continuation of the story that comes in the GM kit for L5R, which is really nice in that if you've bought the GM kit that comes with the Game Master screen, you get a nice little adventure in here. And it's nice that they have those hooks in here that let you kind of continue with those same characters. But I was like, well, this looks really cool. I want to try until like the day of, it finally been gnawing at the back of me. And I was like, you know what? My players are really going to want the story. So I made a last minute decision to swap to run the game that's here in the GM's kit, like the day of. So I'm spending the morning of reading the adventure that I'm running that night. And it's a big like investigation mystery thing. So like it was definitely not the scenario you want to be running like spur of the moment, because there's all these different NPCs, and each NPC has different pieces of knowledge that you're passing around. And so we're running it, and I'm doing very well, and I'm even throwing in some side stuff that like fleshes out the area. They thought it was part of the adventure, but no, I just kind of made it up. So that piece was good. And like we get to our first combat, we end up having to just call it for the night because A, it was getting close to fireworks, and B, kind of forgot the combat rules for L5R. In hindsight, if I could go back prior to that, what I should have done is I should have just, so this is advice for anyone that's running this game, is I should have just made a list of all the NPCs and kind of what each person knows, so that I could quickly, no matter, instead of flipping back and forth between the book, I could quickly reference that and be like, they're going to this guy, he knows this stuff, instead of like flipping through and rereading just to, you know, because I'd read it, but then just kind of like flipping and seeing like, oh, this is this part of the story that they need to get. That, you know, reading the rules for combat, which luckily I did, and ended up playing a couple more games before Gen Con, because the Gen Con L5R games went really smoothly. So definitely glad I messed up with my friends that are just going to give me grief forever, instead of messing up like in front of paying people. And I mean, it's all right to mess up, and we all make mistakes, but not when it's something that could be easily avoided by just practice, you know? It's like the band, it's like going to, people are paying to see a concert and the band just flubbed because they didn't practice for like a month before going on tour or whatever. Not that I'm comparing myself to any sort of skill. But speaking of which, while I've got your attention talking about L5R, and so I wanted to talk about the Shadowlands, because this is the latest book that I've been reading from them. This is what had gotten me all thinking about L5R and wanting to run it, because this book is great. Like the cover, like as soon as I saw this released, I knew I was going to have to get it and take a read of it. You've heard me talk about in the past about L5R basically being, and I even referenced it in this video, Game of Thrones, but with samurai. Well, this basically goes into that aspect even more, because just like in Game of Thrones, where to the north there's a wall that's protecting out like all sorts of baddie goodness. Keep in mind, I know next to nothing about Game of Thrones, even though I've read like the first 3 books. I've not seen zip with the show. But in this, to the south, there is a wall that the Crab Clan built that is protecting most of the world, or Rokugan, from all these demons that fester in this area called the Shadowlands. So this book goes into talking about, if your character step beyond the wall, what's that going to be like? What are your characters going to see? What are they going to, how's the Shadowlands going to react to them? As you get closer to the wall, how are characters going to be treating your characters, because you're going kind of close to areas where everyone's kind of on high alert and guard. In fact, there's really cool diagrams in here of what all the stations at the different guard posts of the tower look like. And there's all these like hidden passages and stuff, really sweet looking diagrams that just, I came up with like a whole bunch of cool ideas that I'd want to put in my own games just on the spot from just looking at the diagrams of all the passageways. I like a nice cutaway of a building where I can see all the hidden secrets and stuff. That just appeals to me. But there's a lot of good story threads in here. It introduces the new Falcon Minor Clan. I think it's called Falcon Minor Clan. So if you're big in the lore and you've been waiting for the Falcon Clan to come in, it's here in this book. And also they've got ways of getting the demonic aspects into your game, the types of characters and types of enemies that they'll come across, some of the lore into how the Shadowlands came into being, and also just what it's going to be like for your characters that they just step into this dark, infested world and slowly become tainted by this corruption, Yeah, something like that. And it even got things in here for having cursed weapons, like weapons that have been fully tainted, and how that's going to interact with your players. So lots of really like evil stuff in here. So, a lot of Rokugan and Legend of the Five Rings is very political in nature. But if you want some downright evil and nastiness added to your game, then you need to pick up a copy of The Shadowlands, The Essential Guide to the Dominion of Fu Ling. I hope I'm saying that right. Have you ever flubbed in a game, like, be it an RPG or a game where, like, you felt like you know what you were doing, but you just absolute failed at running it for somehow? Let me know down in the comments below, and you'll get entered to win a free set of dice, just like Ember Celica, who won the video for the Power Rangers unboxing video that we did. They won a set of dice via that. And so send me an email, chris@boardsandswords.com, and I will get that sent out to you. And in the meantime, make sure you, like I said, comment on this video so you get entered to win. In a future video, I'll reveal even more winners. So make sure you also follow me on social media. And we also have a Patreon. I don't really mention it here on the video channel, but we have a Patreon at patreon.com/boardsandswords where you can go and support. I don't really want people to be spending a whole lot of money, but just if a lot of people could just spend like $1 a month, that'd be cool. We could upgrade some equipment and stuff and really get some cool things going. We're getting dice made for some of our patrons. I've started working on those. If you want some cool stuff, go check out our Patreon, and thanks to all of those who have already supported us on there. Thanks again for watching this video, and I will see you next time. But in the meantime, may all your hits be crits.